Hello, I'm Alma Angeles and you're watching Eagle News International. On tonight's headlines. The Philippine economy rebounded stronger than expected in 2021 after a relaxation of COVID-19 rules, fueled consumer spending and got more people back to work, as they forecast a return to pre-pandemic growth this year. The Department of Health confirmed that the Omicron sublineage BA.2, also known as the stealth Omicron, is now the dominant COVID variant in the country.
Transmission. So based on the worldwide,
next,
really the BA.
North Korea fired 2 suspected ballistic missiles today. And Australian researchers have discovered a strange spinning object in the Milky Way they say is unlike anything astronomers have ever seen. First in our news, the Philippine economy rebounded stronger than expected in 2021 after a relaxation of COVID rules fueled consumer spending and got more people back to work. Officials said today as they forecast a return to pre-pandemic growth this year. GDP expanded 5.6%, according to the Statistics Agency, after a 9.6% slump the previous year. The worst since World War II was fueled by crippling lockdowns, destroying millions of jobs and forcing people to stay home. Let's listen in.
Based on our analysis, yung BA.2 po, siya yan po yung ating dominant and the one circulating variant in the Philippines, particularly in our local community transmission. So based on the worldwide, this is really the BA.2 sublineage of Omicron is really occupying a very small percentage of the global samples that have been sequenced, that have been assigned to the Omicron variant lineage.
The Philippine economy grew by 7.7% year-on-year in the fourth quarter of 2021. On a seasonally adjusted quarter-on-quarter basis, the economy also expanded by 3.1%. This growth performance was much faster than most analysts' forecasts, making the country's expansion among the highest in the region. This sends a strong signal that we are on track to rapid recovery despite the impact of Typhoon Odette. The robust fourth quarter expansion brings full year 2021 GDP growth to 5.6%. This exceeds the Development Budget Coordination Committee's target of 5 to 5.5%. In the second quarter, we saw a reversal from a temporary downturn as the economy expanded by 12%. By ramping up our vaccination program and allowing more sectors to open, we sustained our recovery and still grew by 6.9% in the third quarter amid the surge from the Delta variant. In the last quarter, we further calibrated our strategies by shifting to the alert level system with granular lockdowns. Our efforts to safely reopen the economy allowed more Filipinos to work and earn their income. The door to our economic recovery is now fully open. The numbers for 2021 show an economy primed to break out.
Chua said investments recorded a robust growth of 19%, rebounding from negative 34.4% in 2020, supported by a 37.4% growth in public construction as the government proceeded full steam ahead with the implementation of the Build Infrastructure program. But Capital Economics Emerging Asia economist Alex Holmes also warned that the overall recovery has a long way to go. He said in a research note that the economy will remain in a catch-up mode throughout this year. More than 3.4 million infections have been recorded in the country since the start of the pandemic, with more than 53,000 deaths. Meanwhile, the Department of Health confirmed today that the Omicron sublineage BA.2, also known as the stealth Omicron, is now the dominant COVID variant in the country. UP Philippine Genome Center Executive Director Dr. Cynthia Saloma said they've detected this in all the 12 regions of the country. Take a look.
Based on our analysis, yung BA.2 po, siya yan po yung ating dominant and the one circulating variant in the Philippines, particularly in our local community transmission. So based on the data worldwide, this is really the BA.2 sublineage of Omicron is really occupying a very small percentage of the global samples that have been sequenced, that have been assigned to the Omicron variant lineage. However, there has been an increasing uptick of cases detected with the BA.2 sublineage, particularly in Denmark, in the UK, in Singapore, and also, of course, in India and here in the Philippines. It's really the dominant local subvariant of Omicron that is circulating. So regarding po sa kanyang mga characteristics, the only hallmark lang naman po nito BA.2 has been the fact that it was originally given a moniker of stealth Omicron. And gusto ko pong explain lang na yung stealth Omicron po na BA.2, madidetect pa rin po siya sa RT-PCR, except that tinawag siyang stealth Omicron kasi it lacks the deletion 69 to 70 in the spike region that is really targeted by the commonly used RT-PCR kit doon sa Europe at sa ibang countries na tinatawag nila TACPath. So yung TACPath po na kit na ito has three targets within the genome nitong Omicron o nitong SARS-CoV-2 at kasama na po itong region sa spike protein. Kasi imbis na 3 positives o 3 signals maging positive, nagiging 2 na lang siya kasi nga po may S gene dropout dito. So ginamit nila itong parang signal or hint, the most likely is either an alpha or an Omicron variant kasi wala naman po masyadong ayon, so sinususpect nila Omicron variants. However, si BA.2 po, wala po siyang mutation dito sa 69 to 70 region. Wala siyang deletion, kaya hindi mo siya makikita sa routine S-gene dropout. Positive pa rin siya sa RT-PCR testing, except that yung one of those signals po nawawala. Tinatawag po natin siyang stealth Omicron. Yung naging malaganap sa Pilipinas is really BA.2. If you're going to look at the numbers of the 517 total genome sequences we got with the Omicron lineage, 336 na po ang nasa BA.2, pero yung nasa BA.1 is 180 at yung isang B.1.1.1.529, ito po yung original Omicron, isa lang po yung na-detect natin among our cases. At ito po sa international travelers. So sa cases po natin, mga 248 out of the 336 na samples na na-detect natin na BA.2 are coming from the National Capital Region. So malagana po talaga ang BA.2 dito sa atin.
Dr. Salama also said Omicron was also detected in fully vaccinated individuals, though the disease presentation was mostly asymptomatic to mild. Meanwhile, England today lifted coronavirus restrictions imposed to tackle the Omicron variant, with masks no longer required in enclosed places. Let's hear more from Ashley Espiritu, joining us live from our UK bureau. Hello, Ashley.
Hello, Alma. Thank you. Yes, as you said, England on Thursday today lifted coronavirus restrictions imposed to tackle the Omicron variant, with masks no longer required in enclosed places and vaccine passports shelved. The number of positive COVID-19 cases has fallen sharply over the past 2 weeks, and although still at high levels, have plateaued in recent days. The UK government introduced the so-called Plan B restrictions on December 8, after Prime Minister Boris Johnson warned of a looming tidal wave of Omicron. Face masks were required in all enclosed spaces, and controversially, vaccine documentation also was to enter places such as restaurants, football grounds, and large-scale events. Julia, 28, from Spain, said it was time to have a normal life. It's been 2 years and it's time to take responsibility of ourselves. In Spain, we need to wear masks everywhere, even in the street. She added that even if there's nobody in the street, you need to wear the mask. On the beach, they also need to wear the mask. England previously lifted restrictions on July 19, so-called Freedom Day, but then introduced new rules as the Omicron wave arrived. Health Minister Sajid Javid credited the country's booster program for allowing restrictions to be lifted, saying our vaccines, testing and antivirals ensure we have some of the strongest defenses in Europe and are allowing us to cautiously return to Plan A, restoring more freedoms to this country. From Thursday, passengers on London's transport network will still be required to wear face masks, but they will no longer be mandatory in secondary school classrooms. Unlike Scotland and Wales, which set their own health policy, England kept restaurants open over the festive period, but businesses still took a heavy hit as people stayed at home. Despite the lifting of restrictions, those who test positive for coronavirus must still self-isolate for a minimum of 5 days. Johnson said he also hopes to scrap this rule when they expire on March 24. Back to you, Alma.
Thank you very much, Ashley, for that update. Stay safe.
Thank you for having me, Alma. I'm Ashley Spiritu, reporting from London, United Kingdom, and we live in interesting times.
Staying in the United Kingdom, in a bad-tempered session of weekly questions in Parliament, British Prime Minister Boris Johnson defended his government's record and vows to fight on as he braces for a potentially damning report into lockdown-breaching parties. The dramatic confirmation that London's Metropolitan Police Force has now started its own investigation could complicate the release of Gray's report, but opposition parties insisted on its publication in full. The Prime Minister, in a heated section of weekly questions in Parliament, said he could not comment further on the Partygate revelations pending the investigations. Let's listen in.
Since he acknowledges the ministerial code applies to him, will he now resign?
No, Mr. Speaker. But, you know, since he asks about COVID restrictions, let me just remind the House, and indeed remind the country, that he has been relentlessly opportunistic throughout. Mr. Speaker, what I can tell him is that we've got to leave the report to the independent investigator, as he knows, and of course, when I receive it, of course I will do exactly what I said, but I can tell him that in the meantime, I think what the people of this country want to hear is what we're doing to tackle the issues that matter to all of us, fixing the cost of living, Mr. Speaker, helping people across the country.
Whatever he says in his statement later today or tomorrow won't change the facts. Isn't this a Prime Minister and a government that have shown nothing but contempt for the decency, honesty and respect that define this country?
Speaker, I only wanted to add the point that we've taken the tough decisions, we've got the big calls right, and in particular I, am getting on with the job.
Now, Johnson, the populist architect of Britain's Brexit split from the European Union, has faced public outrage over the parties. He attended several events, including a crowded gathering held for his birthday in June 2020 at a time when indoor socializing was banned. Meanwhile, crowds of travelers are packing into a train station in Shanghai to go home during the Chinese New Year travel rush, a few days ahead of the annual holiday. Let's listen in.
去年是没回家，然后今年是不打算回家，然后看了一眼，然后能回家，然后就订了今天27号的票，过2天就没票了。
其实疫情19年至今，我已经2年没有回家了。今年本来想着不回家的，但是想想我已经2年没回去了，所以今年就是排除万难，做5次核酸我也要回家，因为单位要求特别严。
Now, many passengers who were prevented from journeying home over the past 2 years due to the pandemic say they were willing to make this trip this year, despite particularly strict travel and COVID testing requirements. Meanwhile, Hong Kong on Thursday shortened the mandatory quarantine for international travelers from 3 weeks to 2, even as the city struggles to contain virus outbreaks involving Omicron and Delta variants. Like mainland China, Hong Kong is one of the few places left in the world still pursuing a zero-COVID strategy that has largely kept the virus at bay but left the finance hub internationally isolated. The emergence of the highly transmissible Omicron variant saw the city city increased its travel restrictions in December, slamming borders shut to arrivals from 8 countries, including the Philippines, and banning transit passengers from more than 150 destinations. But Hong Kong leader Carrie Lam today said beginning February 5 rather, the 3-week mandatory quarantine period for all arrivals, some of the longest isolation measures in the world, will be reduced to 2 weeks. Meanwhile, Israel announced that it would start making 4th COVID-19 vaccine shots available to all vulnerable people aged over 18, continuing its drive to beat successive virus waves with top-up jabs. Take a look. On Wednesday, Health Ministry Director Nachman Ash announced a new stage in the campaign, saying that all immunocompromised people and frontline workers over 18 would be eligible for a 4th shot. He also cited a study showing that a 4th dose of the Pfizer vaccine causes a 3 to 5-fold increase in the number of antibodies in a vaccinated person compared to someone who has received 3 doses. More than 600,000 Israelis out of a total population of 9.4 million have received a 4th dose of the vaccine, that according to the Health Ministry figures. The country has seen daily new infection rates rocket to record highs in recent days as the Omicron variant sweeps the globe. So far, Israel has recorded 8,513 deaths due to COVID-19. Meanwhile, snow is covering the streets of Jerusalem and the city's old town, reaching heights between 15 to 25 centimeters, according to the Meteorological Service. Take a look.
Storm, it's every few years we have a storm. This time it was very quick, and it has broken many trees because there was a strong wind. And it's a miracle. It's nice. It's very nice. It's very nice. It's very photogenic, and it's very cold.
The cold snap, which has already caused a major disruption in Athens and Istanbul, saw heavy snowfall in areas better known for their summer heat. Israel's Meteorological Service reported that between 15 and 25 centimeters, or 6 and 10 inches of snow, had fallen overnight. The main highways leading into Jerusalem from the north, south, and west were all blocked today, this morning. Police said snow plows had worked all night to clear the roads inside the city. In a country little used to such wintry conditions, few motorists have snow chains for their cars. Schools in Jerusalem and northern Israel were closed. The snow cover was not expected to last, as warmer temperatures were forecast in the coming days. The Israel Electric Company reported that power consumption reached an all-time high overnight as Israel switched on the heating. Snow also covered higher parts of the occupied West Bank, where the Palestinian Authority closed schools and some public services. In other news, the death toll from a storm that struck 3 southern African countries rose to 70 today as emergency teams battle to repair damaged infrastructure and help tens of thousands of victims. Backing torrential rains, Tropical Storm Ana made landfall on Monday in Madagascar before plowing into Mozambique and Malawi. Rescue workers and authorities across the 3 countries were still assessing the full extent of the damage. Madagascar has reported 41 dead, with 18 others killed in Mozambique and 11 in Malawi. Remnants of the storm have passed over Zimbabwe, but no deaths have been reported there. In the 3 hardest hit countries, tens of thousands of homes were damaged. Some collapsed under the heavy rain, trapping victims in the rubble. Mozambique's weather service expects another storm to form over the Indian Ocean in the coming days. Up to 6 tropical cyclones are expected before the rainy season ends in March. In neighboring Malawi, the government declared a state of natural disaster. A 6.2 magnitude earthquake occurred off the coast of Tonga at 6:40 GMT today, according to the U.S. Geological Survey, with no immediate reports of damage. Take a look. The epicenter of the strong quake was 219 kilometers northwest of Pangai, a town on the remote island of Lifuka, at a depth of 14.5 kilometers. There were no immediate reports of the quake being felt in Tonga or neighboring Fiji. The area has seen daily earthquake activity since Tonga's Hunga Tonga Hunga Ha'apai erupted earlier this month. And almost 2 weeks after the volcanic eruption and tsunami in Tonga, the government is continuing to provide relief for the hardest hit islands. According to the UN Humanitarian Office, OCHA, the country's entire population has been impacted by fallen ash, and about 84,000 people, or 84% of the population, have been directly affected. Disrupted communication lines, which were initially hard to reach, are being visited by assessment teams and gradually re-established. And while some 3,000 people had to seek shelter on higher ground in the immediate aftermath, the vast majority have now returned home. Access to safe water is the chief humanitarian concern, as many reservoirs have been contaminated and need to be cleaned. Tonga remains COVID-free, and the government operates strict protocols requesting that all international support be delivered in a contactless manner. Excluding water, relief supplies are being held in quarantine for a period of 72 hours. In other news, Russia said today its views were not addressed in a U.S. response to its security proposals to end tensions over Ukraine, but added that Moscow will not respond hastily. Take a look.
Что касается содержания документа, там есть реакция, которая позволяет рассчитывать на начало серьезного разговора, но по второстепенным вопросам. По главному вопросу в этом документе реакции позитивной нет. А главным вопросом, я напомню, является наша четкая позиция о недопустимости дальнейшего расширения НАТО на восток и размещения ударных вооружений, которые могут угрожать территории Российской Федерации. Эта позиция, она сложилась не на пустом месте.
Tensions between Russia and the West have reached a post-Cold War peak after Moscow deployed tens of thousands of troops on the Ukrainian border, raising fears of an invasion. Now, Russia denies any plans to invade, but last month put forward demands of wide-ranging security guarantees from the West, including that Ukraine never be allowed to join the U.S.-led NATO military alliance. The U.S. on Wednesday delivered a reply in coordination with NATO allies, rejected any ban on Ukraine, but offering what it called a new diplomatic path out of the crisis. Meanwhile, Ukraine today welcomed Russia's plans to continue talks in early February as good news and a sign that Moscow was intent on finding a diplomatic solution to the current crisis. Senior Russian and Ukrainian officials met on Wednesday in Paris with representatives of France and Germany. Let's listen in.
Nothing has changed. This is the bad news. The good news is that advisors agreed to meet in Berlin in 2 weeks, which means that at least for the next 2 weeks, Russia is likely to remain on a diplomatic track. So this is the good news. We are in a situation where even the agreement to meet again is a good news. We really have to focus more on hard power rather than on soft power. I'm not underestimating the importance of soft power, but this crisis is always a moment of truth. And this is why we speak about weapons, this is why we speak about economic sanctions, this is why we speak about the consolidated position of all of us, so that President Putin sees that there are no weak links in our defensive chain.
Now, global concerns are growing over a potential Russian invasion of Ukraine, as tens of thousands of Russian troops have been stationed at the border in recent weeks. The United States again encouraged its citizens to leave Ukraine, warning an invasion could be imminent. But Ukraine's government, hoping to prevent panic, has played down the dangers and sought to offer ways out. Mr. Kuleba told reporters that the Russian troops posed a threat back to Ukraine, but that the numbers deployed were insufficient for a full-scale offensive. Meanwhile, Denmark on Thursday announced an aid package of 550 million kroner, or $83 million, or 74 million euros, for Ukraine between 2022 and 2026. Meanwhile, North Korea fired 2 suspected ballistic missiles today, according to Seoul. Its 6th weapons test this month in one of the most intense spates of launches on record that has delivered an emphatic rejection of Washington's offers for talks on its nuclear program. Take a look. Analyst Ankit Panda wrote on Twitter, "I believe if we include the 2 cruise missiles, this is now the most recorded North Korean missile launches in any month ever. The barrage could be part of North Korea's regular military training or linked to ongoing celebrations of Kim's decade in power or upcoming domestic anniversaries," he added. The country is preparing to mark the 80th anniversary of the birth of Kim's father, late leader Kim Jong-il, in February, as well as the 110th anniversary of its founding leader, Kim Il-sung, in April. Pyongyang has not fired this many missiles in a calendar month in decades, according to data compiled by the Center for Strategic and International Studies, a Washington-based think tank. Seoul's Joint Chiefs of Staff said it detected 2 suspected short-range ballistic missiles fired from the Hamhung City area towards the East Sea, or Japan, from around 8 a.m. Pyongyang has repeatedly defended its weapons program as part of the legitimate exercise of the right to self-defense. It hasn't tested intercontinental ballistic missiles or nukes since 2017. But last week, it also hinted it could restart such launches, blaming U.S. hostile policy for forcing its hand. China's ambassador to South Korea, Sing Haiming, told local radio MBC on the year moratorium on long-range and nuclear testing. In other news, the Commission on Elections will conduct 3 presidential and vice presidential debates as it hoped for the participation of all candidates for these posts. Take a look.
Nakikita natin na mataas ang interest ng mga kababayan natin sa mga pagkakataon kung saan nagkaharap-harap ang mga kandidato, and we will make sure that we give them an opportunity to see that in a COMELEC-sanctioned event para lahat dumalo. No? We expect that mataas ang participation natin from the candidates when we stage the debates in February. The debates, please look for the debates starting February, the 4th week of February. Then another debate, February, March, and April. 1 debate a month, basically. Ito ay para sa masakop natin yung buong campaign period. Kakaroon tayo ng stage kung saan sila ay appropriately distanced. No? So hopefully, maiwasan natin yung need for a mask. Kasi pwede, lalagyan naman natin ng kahon eh. Diba? So parang naka-isolate naman sila.
Parang beauty contest na merong ano.
Opo. Tapos wala tayong live audience. So pero definitely yung mga media magko-cover, meron tayong stringent requirements diyan, katulad ng requirements na inilatag natin for the filing of COCs, no? Kung saan hindi ka pwedeng pumasok sa venue unless may vaccination ka, or kung wala kang vaccination, nagpa-swab ka on that day. So may mga ganun tayong requirements para dun sa mga dadalo, and for the candidates themselves, again, we will make sure that they are adequately protected.
Now, Jimenez said the poll body is planning to hold the debates in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. He added that e-rallies will be held 3 hours per night, where each candidate will have a slot. Take a look.
Magiging parang 3 hours a night. 3 hours a night, and then each candidate will have a slot, no? So for example, for president, sa isang gabi meron kang 3 presidentiable at 10 minutes each. So 10 minutes silang magla-live stream, bahala sila kung anong gawin nila doon, sumayaw sila, kumanta sila, magsalita sila, bahala sila. Pero kanila yung oras na yon, and 3 yan. And then magsa-cycle po tayo, no? So 10 yan. So yung susunod na 3 kinabukasan, yung susunod na 3 kinabukasan, tapos so on hanggang sa matapos yung election period. So it will be a regular channel for them to actually reach out to the candidate, to the voters, no? Ganun din po para sa senador. Halimbawa, sa senador naman, kung hindi ako nagkakamali, 5 minutes per senator, 5 minutes then per party list organization. Kasi lahat yan po sila bibigyan natin ng pagkakataon na mag-live stream.
And the news continues here on Eagle News. We'll be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Welcome back. Equity markets mostly retreated today with the sharpest losses in Asia after Federal Reserve Chief Jerome Powell refused to be drawn on the pace of U.S. interest rate hikes to battle decades-high inflation. Although Powell on Wednesday firmed market expectations of a rate increase in March, investors were spooked by what happens thereafter. Take a look.
Like most forecasters, we continue to expect inflation to decline over the course of the year. We understand that high inflation imposes significant hardship, especially on those least able to meet the higher costs of essentials like food, housing, and transportation. Yet, and we'll make that decision at the March meeting. We'll make a decision whether to raise the federal funds rate. I would say that the committee is of a mind to raise the federal funds rate at the March meeting, assuming that conditions are appropriate for doing so. We have our eyes on the risks. A number of factors are supporting a decline in inflation, as I mentioned. Fiscal policy will be providing significantly less of an impulse to growth. We do expect this year, although we do expect now that it will come slower than we had expected and hoped, that there will be relief on the supply side. So that too should lower these supply side barriers, which are a big part of the story why inflation is high. In addition, monetary policy will be becoming significantly less accommodative. So I would not say that I would expect the supply chain issues to be completely worked out by the end of this year. I do not expect them, and I have not expected them. What I would say, and I have been saying, is that I expect progress to be made in the second half of this year, mainly. Progress, because we're not making much progress. If you look at a ton of metrics, you can find some that suggest that delivery times are shorter and inventories in some industries moving up. But overall, we're not making progress. The recent sharp rise in COVID cases associated with the Omicron variant will surely weigh on economic growth this quarter. High-frequency indicators point to reduced spending in COVID-sensitive sectors, such as travel and restaurants. And activity more broadly may also be affected as many workers are unable to report for work because of illness, quarantines, or caregiving needs. Fortunately, health experts are finding that the Omicron variant has not been as virulent as previous strains of the virus, and they expect that cases will drop off rapidly. If the wave passes quickly, the economic effects should as well, and we would see a return to strong growth. That said, the implications for the economy remain uncertain.
Now, his reluctance to give clear guidance on further tightening helped the dollar to reach a two-month high against the euro today. Powell's comments sent Wall Street sharply lower from their intraday levels, with tech firms, which are more susceptible to higher borrowing costs, taking the brunt. Sharp Asian losses followed, particularly among tech stocks. Seoul tanked more than 3% into a bear market, a 20% drop from its recent high hit in August, while Sydney fell into a correction, having given up to 10% from its latest peak. Tokyo took a 3.1% pounding as market heavyweight Sony and SoftBank, which invest heavily in the tech sector, led losses, while Hong Kong was 2% off. Europe was mixed with gains for London, Milan, and Madrid, while Frankfurt and Paris fell in midday deals, awaiting the Wall Street Open. In other business news, the European Union angered China by launching a case against Beijing at the World Trade Organization for targeting Lithuania over its stance on Taiwan. Valdis Dombrovskis, Executive Vice President of the European Commission, held a press conference on this issue. The latest spat is over Lithuania, one of the smallest countries in the EU, which made waves in July when it allowed Taiwan to open a diplomatic outpost in Vilnius. Beijing responded bitterly to the move, calling the so-called Chinese coercion against Lithuania groundless and inconsistent. Let's listen in.
Have not found this solution, and China's coercive practices against Lithuania and also other countries' exporters which have Lithuanian content in their value chains, those coercive practices continue. That's why we are now launching this WTO case. But as I said, in parallel, we continue also our efforts on de-escalation. Trade policy is EU's exclusive competence. We have a single market, so that's one when also in a situation when one member state is under the coercive pressure, or it's actually, as I described, spreading also to other countries and other companies, then EU has to act.
所谓中国对立陶宛进行胁迫，纯属无中生有、颠倒黑白。我们也提醒欧盟方面明辨是非，警惕立陶宛绑架中欧关系的企图，劝导立陶宛同欧盟其他成员国一样，履行同中国建交时所做的政治承诺。
Now, Lithuanian business leaders accuse China of blocking imports from Lithuania and other economic restrictions, and the EU even said that it had built up a trove of evidence of Chinese restrictions. In November, China downgraded diplomatic ties with Lithuania and stopped issuing visas there in protest at Vilnius's decision to allow Taiwan to open the representative office under its own name. And despite the evidence, Dombrovskis said that the bloc would continue to pursue diplomatic solutions to the feud and has raised the problem with its Chinese counterparts in recent weeks. Meanwhile, Apple reclaimed its position as the top smartphone seller in China after 6 years, clocking a record market share in the final quarter of 2021 as U.S. sanctions hit rival Huawei, according to researchers. A surge in sales saw the iPhone maker account for 23% of the highly competitive market in October to December, according to industry analysis firm Counterpoint in a report released on Wednesday. That put the U.S. giant in pole position for the first time since the final 3 months of 2015, toppling China's Vivo. Apple's stellar performance was driven by a mix of its pricing strategy and gain from Huawei's premium base, according to Counterpoint research analyst Meng Zhang. Apple rose to first place in China right after the iPhone 13 was released in September, she added, noting it had a lower starting price than its rivals. The IMF has warned President Nayib Bukele on the risks of the cryptocurrency poses to the country. It urged El Salvador to reverse its decision to make Bitcoin legal tender and stressed that it would be difficult to get a loan from the institution. Take a look.
Fíjese que para mí me da igual que lo quiten o esté, porque para mí no es ningún beneficio eso. Yo aquí vengo a trabajar solo con el dólar, Bitcoin no acepto yo.
Sí, no estoy de acuerdo que quiten o deroguen la ley, ¿verdad? Bitcoin, porque estaríamos dando, no estaríamos viendo el futuro de nuestra economía.
No, pues no nos afectaría realmente, porque ya la gente ya sabe que aceptamos Bitcoin, ya sabe que puede andar su dinero seguro en su teléfono y ya como que sería un paso como para retroceder nuevamente, ¿verdad? Porque...
British airline EasyJet slashed losses by half in the first quarter despite the emergence of the Omicron coronavirus variant, which disrupted travel industry, according to the company. Pre-tax losses stood at 213 million euros, or 213 million pounds rather, in the 3 months to the end of December, after a £423 million loss in the same period of the group's previous financial year, the no-frills carrier said in a statement. Chief Executive John Lundgren said during the pandemic, EasyJet has transformed many areas of the business, including optimizing its network and flexibility and finding sustainable cost savings. And this is helping partially offset inflationary pressure. The spread of the Omicron variant in December did hit travel bookings, but they were subsequently boosted by the UK government's recent decision to scrap COVID travel testing. As cleanup work on the Peruvian coast continues after the oil spill caused by freak waves from the eruption of Tonga volcano, a new leak occurred at the same refinery, the La Pampilla. Oscar Garcia, head of the National Service of Protected Natural Areas, says the extent of the disaster cannot yet be calculated, but says it's an irreparable ecological catastrophe. Take a look.
En realidad es un desastre ecológico, ¿no? Irreparable. Las magnitudes a la fecha no se pueden calcular, entendiendo que el ecosistema marino tiene todo un comportamiento con respecto, por ejemplo, a su cadena trófica, ¿no?
In other news, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres warned of the resurgence of anti-Semitism, the oldest form of hate and prejudice, while welcoming new efforts by the General Assembly and others to clearly define and actively combat Holocaust denial. Take a look.
Today, we remember the 6 million Jewish men, women, and children who perished in the Holocaust, and also the Roma and Sinti and the countless other victims of its unprecedented horror and calculated cruelty. The Holocaust defined the United Nations. Our very name was coined to describe the alliance fighting the Nazi regime and its allies. Our charter was drafted in San Francisco as the Dachau concentration camp was liberated. The United Nations must always be on the front line of the fight against anti-Semitism and all other forms of religious bigotry and racism. Today, we witness an alarming resurgence of xenophobia and hate. Anti-Semitism, the oldest and most persistent form of prejudice, is rising yet again. Attempts to downplay or downright deny the Holocaust are proliferating. Today, let us commit to never be indifferent to the suffering of others and never forget what happened or let it be forgotten by others. Let us pledge to always be vigilant and uphold human rights and dignity for all.
The Holocaust saw the genocide of 6 million European Jews between 1939 and 1945 by the Nazis and their supporters. Meanwhile, Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid pays tribute to Holocaust victims at the Mauthausen concentration camp as part of his travels across Austria to commemorate the 77th Holocaust Memorial Day. The UN General Assembly on Thursday adopted a non-binding resolution calling on all member states to fight against Holocaust denial and anti-Semitism, especially on social media. Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid and his German counterpart Annalena Baerbock in a joint statement welcomed the resolution, which they served as proof that the international community speaks with one voice on the subject. A resolution in 2005 designated January 27 as an International Day of Remembrance for the victims of Holocaust. And finally, in our news, Australian researchers have discovered a strange spinning object in the Milky Way they say is unlike anything astronomers have ever seen. Take a look.
Well, it's tremendously exciting. To find an entirely new class of object, that's just incredible. In my life, I've discovered a pulsar, a radio galaxy. I've done huge surveys across the whole sky and found all sorts of interesting things, but they were all known types of objects. This is the first time I found something completely unexpected that nobody even thought would be able to produce this kind of emission. First off, transients are expected to be in known classes of objects. So there are pulsars, for instance, which pulse with an obvious period of about 2 to 10 seconds. There are gamma ray afterglows, which come up over the course of weeks and then disappear over the course of months. So there are these known classes of object. Our source has a periodicity of 18 minutes. On the dot, every 18 minutes, plus or minus a little, it repeats. Now, this is completely unusual because there are no known classes of objects which can do this. If it is an ultra-long period magnetar, there should be a huge population waiting to be discovered. The key thing here was that nobody knew they would emit in the radio. Now that we know it's possible, the windows are open, we can look out and find this incredible hidden population.
Now, scientists said the object may be something researchers have theorized could exist but have never seen, called an ultra-long period magnetar. It could also be a white dwarf, a remnant of a collapsed star. The next step for the researchers is to look for new research. And as always, I'll end the day on a thoughtful note. Our ability to look back and smile at our past is proof that God's plan is to keep us moving forward. And this has been Eagle News International. I'm Alma Angeles. Stay alert, stay informed, because we live in interesting times. Good night.